In this video, we are going to be looking at classes. So let's start by what are classes. Now classes are backbone of object-oriented programming because classes define objects, they tell what an object is and they define what an object can do. Now we've been working with objects already. We've seen that pretty much everything in Ruby is an object. But those are Ruby's objects, the ones that are predefined for us. This is going to be where object-oriented programming really begins for us because now we are going to be able to write our own classes that will define our own objects. So in order to get started with that, we first need to see how to define a class, and the syntax is very simple. So it's just class and end with the definition of our class in the middle, very similar to what we had when we had methods. We had def and end, so now it's classes. The one big difference though is the naming of a class. Methods were all lowercase with underscores between the words. Class names are going to be what we call the camel case. We call it camel case because it has the humps in the middle like that capital N you can see. As I've defined class and some name in that N is the capital one. So that's very important. Class names have to begin with a capital letter. So it wouldn't matter here really if we had some name and it was a lowercase n, or if we wanted to capitalize the n. So it's up to you when you define it, whether you want to call it some name in the lowercase or some name with a capital N. But the S has to be always in the capital for a class name. Now classes are going to do a number of different things for us, but one of things they are going to do is they are going to group our code into discrete, well categorized areas that make it easier to work with. So at the very beginning, what we are going to learn to do is wrap up methods inside there and see how we can take the methods that we just learned in the last chapter and put them inside our classes. So let's try creating our class with a method in it. So for example, say here we are trying to create a class, just say animal. Right there in my capital letter A in front, you see I have created the one. So that's very important, and then typically you'll indent everything after that so that it's very clear where the class begins and ends. So let's put a method inside there, and I've called it make underscore noise, and it's going to make the noise of an animal moo. And then we close the make underscore noise method with end, and then again end for close class. Now we are trying to create a new object from a class, so let's say animal.new to start with. So that will create a new animal, but we need to hold on to that once we've created it. So we are going to assign that to a variable animal equals animal.new. Now I created a new object, and now that object is being held by my variables. So I can always just say animal, and there it is, my variable animal always points to it. Now I just want you to see if we just call make underscore noise on its own. So make underscore noise is inside the class animal. So we need to tell animal to do the making of the noise. And we do that with the dot notation, as you can see in the last statement, that is animal dot make underscore noise. So there we are, it will return moo. So it called the method make underscore noise inside that object. So let's try and create our own classes practically. And for this, I am going to switch over to my Sublime text editor where I have already loaded my program named as classes.rb. So you can just grab your code from your working files and start working on that. So here you can see in my Sublime text editor at the right side I have my classes.rb code, and first of all I have defined a class named as animal. Then I have within that class I have defined a method as make underscore noise which says moo, and then I have ended. Now you can see the first block which is ending here is for the first end is used for ending my method, and the second end is for my ending my class. You can see the scope very well right here. Fine. Then next, what am I doing? I have stored it here I have created an object, and it is animal.new, and finally I am calling it here, that is animal.make underscore noise. Right. Now you can notice one thing, that here puts is missing. Okay, so I'll just quickly write it here, that is puts. Fine, else I won't get my output done here. So just save my script. Now if I want to print the output, I can just do it right here, and the output will be printed like this, that is Ruby. And then do not forget the name of my program, that is classes.rb. So here first of all, the very first output is marked here. You see that is has been printed, right? So it is printing for my this one. Okay, so this was a very simple example. Now let me explain you a bit complex example and a more of a use case example. So here I'm just going to make custom methods in order to create my Ruby objects. Fine, and do not get confused, but an object is simply an instance of a class and may be called a class instance also. Fine. So here first of all, what am I doing here is I am defining a class named as customer. Alright, it is a very simple. You can take a look at the output later. First of all, I'll just explain you right here. So I've defined a class named as customer, within which I'm defining a method as initialize, and that initialize is taking the arguments as customer ID, customer name and customer address. We've already seen in the last video how to store arguments within the methods. So in this one here I am creating the instance variable. So how do I know it's an instance variable? Because I've used at after my customer ID, and in the last video we saw how to define the instance variable because it is going to use at after it, right? So here this customer ID, it is storing my customer ID. Then I've created a variable for customer name, this is right here, and one for customer address. So here my this method is ending, right? The block ends for my method. Now there is one more property about classes, that within a class you can define multiple methods. So here similarly I have defined another method as my output, and in this output what am I doing? I'm simply using it to print. So here you see I am printing ID of the customer is, and then I'm concatenating my string after this. Alright, so similarly here the first end block is for my this one. I'll just indent it here. So this is for my output method, and then this end is for my class customer. So here what I'm doing here is I'm defining here my object, that is cust1, and in this I'm storing my arguments here, right? These are the value for my arguments or the parameters which I was passing right here, right? So this is the customer address, then I have a customer name, and then I have a customer ID too. Similarly for second customer also, and finally I'm just printing those outputs, right? So the details of first customer will be printed with this puts cust1.output, and similarly for puts cust2.output. So cust1 will take the arguments from here and it will print them, and similarly for cust2. So let's see this here. Is it doing that? And yes, absolutely it is doing that. So you can see here ID of the customer is, and ID of the customer is 1, then ID of the customer is 2, oh sorry, the name is here John, and then the address, and finally for the second customer details are just right here. Okay, and this is what I wanted to print here. This was just to give you a distinguishing, right? You see you can distinguish easily here. Okay, so this was a simple way to define your classes. Now there's one more thing, that you have inheritance, the concept of inheritance, which is again very simple. So here is the code for that. So everything is absolutely similar. You can see I'm defining a method as initialize, then I'm defining a method as output, and the only difference is I'm going to create another class. Now we are familiar with the concept of inheritance, that one class can inherit the properties of other classes. Fine. So here similarly it is doing, I have defined another class as another customer. Okay, and this is inheriting the property of this customer class, which is defined right here. And you see this is just a simple output I'm print that I'm getting, that my class has been inherited. The point here is that I've defined an object here and I'm storing these values here. Okay, so ID is 3, customer ID, this is the customer name, and this is the customer address, and finally I'm getting my output right here. So for running this code, similarly here what am I going to do is I'm just going to write here Ruby, and then classes and hyphen. Just be specific with the name of your program .rb. So just right here is your output. You see the first output that it prints here is that the class is inherited by the customer class, because here this is what I wanted in my puts. First of all, that was just to specify that my class has been inherited or not. Finally, and here is the ID of the customer, then the name, and finally the address. So these are the simple ways in which you can define your classes. So remember, within a class you can define a method, and you can even define multiple methods. You can even inherit your classes. So this is up for this video. See you in the next video.